Welcome to Reddit Aliens. People who have had paranormal experiences, what's your story? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. When I was a little kid, my family moved to the hills of West Virginia and lived in a small house that was built in the 1920s. I hated this house, specifically my room. How my room was set up was that my bed was in a corner and my closet was directly across from my bed. Facing the closet to the right was a doorway with no door leading into a playroom. The door to leave my room was to the left of my closet on the wall that the bed was on. Every night, I sat there staring at my closet door. My dog, who was a bigger husky, shepherd, Mutt, would lay at the door whining to get out of my room, as I made her stay with me, which she never did in any other room, even when she needed to go outside. My fearless dog hating being in my room. After a while, the fear didn't get any better. I would beg my parents to let me stay at my grandparents' house, which was next door, or for my dad to stay in my room with me until I fell asleep. I had never had trouble going to sleep on my own, so my parents thought this was just some way to get attention or something. Well, one night, all of this fear and everything else came to a head. I was lying in my bed, pillows stacked up so I wouldn't have to see my closet door, hiding under the covers. I heard my dog yelp. This being odd, I peeked out of the covers and saw nothing. As soon as I laid back down, I heard the handle fall off of my old closet door. The handle falling off wasn't something new, as it was only a front knob and a rod was found on the floor quite frequently. No one thought a thing of it and would just pick it up and place it back in the hole. When I heard the knob fall, I terrifyingly looked over, and no one nor I had ever actually seen it fall before. Since the door was old, the knob kept the mechanism latched so the door wouldn't open. Since the knob was out, the door creaked open like in a horror movie. At this point, I was so scared I couldn't move or scream or do anything. My dog at this point of whining very loud, but not loud enough for my parents in their room to hear. Then she stopped, just stopped. I looked at the open closet door and saw a small, frail boy with a very large head. All of him was black except for where his eyes should be. He slowly turned and looked at me, and I didn't feel fear. I felt devastation. I felt the most extreme anger and sadness and intense emotions I have ever felt. It wasn't natural. After what seemed like forever, I bolted out of my room, sobbing, and ran to my parents. My parents never let me sleep with them, so my father took me back to bed and waited until I fell asleep. From then on, I would throw actual fits if I wasn't allowed to stay the night at my grandparents' on nights I had to stay home. The same experience would happen every single night. I wouldn't sleep if I stayed at my house, so my parents gave in and let me stay with my grandparents most nights. It got to the point where my mom was telling my godmother what was happening, and she offered to bless the room as she was a devout Catholic. After this, things got better for about a week, and then all collapsed into the same horror show every night. My parents aren't very religious, but eventually decided to test it out for themselves. My mother stayed in my room one night and decided that we needed to move the next day. I've never seen that little boy again, but the thought of it brings me to tears, and I don't know what it was. I believe in the supernatural. It's kind of hard for me not to. I wasn't the only one to experience this. My old house was tested for any kind of leaks or slow poisoning and was clear. After selling it, we found out that the people that lived there refused to use that room, which I found interesting, because they never knew what had happened. TLDR. I was terrorized every night by a little ghost boy who was a dark shadow with a large head and translucent glowing eyes. After months, my parents finally believed me, and we moved out after a blessing did seemingly nothing. I have several, but this one bugs me the most. When my son was in the 3rd grade, he was homesick from school. He had a bad ear infection that was extremely painful. So I'm laying in bed with him, we're watching Star Trek, and all of a sudden he starts crying, like freaking bawling. So I'm trying to comfort him, telling him everything will be okay. He starts telling me that he sees things, people that aren't there late at night. One in particular is a tall shadow figure that stands by his closet and watches him. I think he's schizophrenic. So time goes on, and weird things start happening around the house. Dark figures standing out of the corner of your eye, etc. But the absolute worst of the worst is one night my wife and I got into a big fight, like nearly marriage-ending fight. So I go to sleep on the couch in the living room. The couch sits where if you're lying down, you can see all the way down the hallway. So I'm lying there, and around 3 a.m., something wakes me up. I hear the door to my son's room open. I sit up thinking it's him, but there's no one there. Then I hear footsteps on the hardwood. They walk all the way into the living room and stop. I lift up and look. There's no one there. I hear the footsteps go back down the hall. His door opens and then closes again. So I'm laying there, freaked out. Can't sleep, and all of a sudden, his door creaks open again. This time I sit up on the couch and call out his name. Nothing. Then comes the footsteps, all the way into the living again. I stand up, flip on the flashlight, on the phone, and shine it down the hall. There is no one effing there. The footsteps go back down the hall. His door opens, then shuts. I leap up, run to his room, and throw open the door. There's no one there. He's sound asleep on his bed. It scared the shit out of me. I know there was something there watching me that night, and that it went into my son's room. Looking at a magazine in bed on the bottom bunk using a flashlight, all of a sudden there was someone standing next to my bed so close the top bunk beam blocked the view of them from about nipple height up. Got super scared and turned away. When I looked back a second later, of course, no one was there. He was wearing jean overalls with a red and black checkered flannel underneath. Come to find out, an old guy died not only in my house, but in that room way before we lived there. He died of natural causes, and I had some other little experiences like orbs and faces in the dark here and there. Bonus, my friend during a party went to get a ping pong ball that bounced down the hall, and when he bent down to get it, he saw an old man wearing overalls and a black and red checkered flannel standing in my bedroom. I hadn't told anyone about this at the time, and when he came back freaked out, I had him describe what he saw, and was tripping after he described the man. It was probably 10 years from the bunk bed situation and the party. I was spending the night at my girlfriend's, future ex-wife, parents' house over the holidays. We were in our 20s at the time, so they didn't care about us sleeping together in the same room. They had recently bought furniture for the bedroom we were sleeping in. It had been his sister's bedroom, but she had committed suicide about a year earlier, so they had decided to redo it. The furniture was all expensive antiques and had been a set: bed, chair, blanket, chest, and a very large armoire with a full-length mirror on the center door, 3 doors on it. The first night there, I bolt up wide awake in the middle of the night, the hair standing up on my neck. As my eyes adjust, I swear I can see a white haze in the chair to my left. As I'm staring, watching, I see the haze rise up, and now I'm looking at an old woman in a long nightgown, literally with an old nightcap on her head and holding a candle in an old-style candle holder, the kind with the plate on the bottom and a ring to hold it. She slowly crosses the room right at the foot of the bed and disappears into the mirror on the armoire on their night. Needless to say, I never slept in that room again. My mom told me a story. I don't remember as I was too young. She was bathing me in a trailer home she had back then, and I asked her, "Mommy, who's that man behind you?" And no one was there. She also told me there was a rocking chair that rocked by itself. Another time I was staying the night at my cousin or grandparents' place and woke up in the middle of the night to what sounded like multiple people talking in the next room. I don't think it was too weird until I asked my cousin about it years later, and he said he had woke up too that night and didn't recognize the voices. I heard a man talking one night about his regrets and stuff like that when my mom and dad were both asleep next to me. It was a sort of wake-up, hear weird talking, think nothing of it, and go back to sleep type thing. I was very young. I was at a new apartment, first night there. Those apartments are right next to a cemetery. I had the same nightmare the whole time I lived there. I still remember it very clearly. My buddy and I were up to no good one summer. For some reason, I really wanted to rob a house. I was a bad kid. Anyway, after we had broke a window or some other hood rat shit, we went running back to his house. On the way there is a big mansion house on about 2 to 3 acres of land in a weird spot, really. It was behind a convenience store in a residential area in one of the bad parts of town. Anyway, we were running to his house, and as we were passing this mansion in a field, we saw what looked like a woman in a long white dress keeping pace with us, but not in a running pose, and we couldn't see her feet. She was floating at the speed we were running. We got back to his house and I asked if he saw it. He said yes, and that was that. Never saw it again. So I went to this decommissioned penitentiary that gave tours with some friends one year. I'm not a believer in ghosts, our tour guide was. Me being a curious cat, I wandered away from the tour group and into an empty room. The tour guide and his buddies had some ghost gear like equipment to try and find ghosts laying out in the room. So I enter this room, pitch black. It was the warden's son's bedroom, and a little machine starts shrieking and lights up. Later found out it was an EMF/EMP pump or something. It startled me, so I backed out of the room. My tour guide runs over all like, "What did you see?" And I'm like, "I saw F all, it was dark." He made me go back into the room. Machine was quiet. We tried to set it off, no dice. I figured it was a fluke. We keep going. He takes us down to the actual jail cells, telling us bloody tales along the way. One tale ends as we walk into a jail cell. The story was that an inmate in this cell pissed off the other prisoners by ratting on them, and they cornered him into this cell where he shut the door behind him, but they stabbed him to death through the bars. Our tour guide says that he heard some mysterious audio when he was recording there, and we would like to hear it. We're like, "Yeah, sure." It sounded like static to me, and he says, "Can you guys hear it? It says, 'Help me, help me.'" And I was like, "Are you sure? Sounds like static." Well, that pissed him off, and he pulls out the other people in the tour group from the cell, and it's just me. Then he locked me in, shut the door, actually locked the door, trapping me in there, said that non-believers like me needed to hear the real thing, and walks off with the tour group, who were in two friends and their moms or sisters who thought me getting locked in jail was funny. Anyways, they walk away, so I just sat on the empty metal bed frame. It was pitch black and so quiet I could hear my own ears ringing. Honestly, I had been working 2 jobs and was really tired, so I took a little nap on my jacket. They came back 10 minutes later and panicked because I was laying down in the cell not moving. Them panicked startled me awake, so I woke up screaming, which then made them scream too. I don't think I'm welcome back there, lol. About 6 years ago, when I was a kid, I was playing with my toys in my room alone. The rest of my family was in the living room across the house. I was facing the closet, which was about 4 feet in front of me. I saw someone standing over me in the top of my vision wearing flannel, jeans, and boots. I look up from my toys, figuring it was my dad, and the person disappears. I didn't think much of it. I figured the clothes were set up in a way that appeared vaguely humanoid, although I was a bit skeptical because the clothes the man was wearing didn't match anything in my closet. This happened a few more times. I would walk into my room and see someone sitting on the table, but disappear once I would look directly at the area. Eventually, after this happened several times a day for about a week, I confronted my mom and explained everything, looking for some comfort or reassurance. She stayed silent for a second and then told me she was also seeing these mysterious figures, specifically for the past week as well. My heart rate fired up as I realized it wasn't just me, and the idea that I wasn't just seeing things solidified. I was genuinely terrified for a while. After talking with my mom, I never saw anything similar again. When I was 8 years old or so, I experienced a lot of creepy shit. It seemed like every night that I'd wake up to a freezing cold room and to witness someone standing at the edge of my bed staring at me. My bed was in the middle of the room, and there wasn't anything in front of me, so it couldn't have been a shadow. Plus he, yes, he, always felt so familiar to me, but still left me terrified. I called him the dude that lives in the closet, and I remember I used to try and tie my closet doors closed with a blue skip rope so he couldn't come out, but it never did anything, because I'd get up to the skip rope untied on the ground. I think the most uneasy part was the fact that a close family friend of ours had died recently before this started happening. I didn't want to believe it was him because the feeling that this gave me was so negative, but the one who had passed away made me feel safe. This wasn't the only thing that happened, it was just the most scarring. To 8-year-old me anyways. It was just weird stuff like random chills, drastic room temperature changes, doors opening and closing on their own, things going missing, the constant feeling of never being alone, being watched, and occasional voices. It's not happening anymore, and it hasn't since we left that house.